In the year 2249, Earth looked like a paradise from space. Cities floated high in the sky, glowing with clean quantum energy. Machines handled nearly every task: farming, construction, even teaching. People lived longer, worked less, and dreamed bigger. Earth had grown powerful. Too powerful. But beneath the surface, fear was growing. For years, alien signals had been picked up by deep space satellites. Most were harmless background noise, data bursts, strange music, even what sounded like whispers. But one day, a new signal came. It wasn't random. It was directed. And it was close, only a few light hours from Mars. At the Global Research Station above the Pacific Sky Zone, Dr. Lian Reyes stood alone in a cold observation dome. A dozen screens blinked in front of her, each displaying parts of the strange transmission. Lian was 34 years old, a quiet thinker with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had spent her life studying alien languages. Not just the words, but the patterns behind them. She believed that understanding how another species spoke could show how they thought and how they feared. She tapped the glass screen. There, she whispered. A repeating pattern. Not sound. Not words. It was a warning code used by the Threxian species, a high-ranking member of the Galactic Coalition. She adjusted her earpiece. Base, this is Reyes. The signal, it's a containment code. It's not just a warning. It's a threat. Silence. Then a voice replied. Calm. Cold. Copy that, Dr. Reyes. Send your full report to command. Effective immediately, your clearance has been raised. Do not discuss your findings. The call ended. Lian stared at the screen. The pattern repeated again. Warning, Containment Protocol 9A, Threat Status, Earth Expansion. She leaned back, trying to stay calm. For a moment, the room seemed too quiet. On the lower levels of the station, leaders from Earth's Central Council were already meeting. Their faces were stern. They spoke in hushed tones about Project Horizon, a massive defense program hidden beneath Earth's surface. It was supposed to be a planetary shield, but everyone in the room knew its true power. It could fire back. The Council feared an alien strike. They didn't know that the aliens feared one too. Lian watched the stars through the dome's wide glass panels. Billions of them. Peaceful. Quiet. But behind that quiet, something was building. She looked down at her notes. Symbols, warnings, alien words stacked together. They didn't hate humans. They feared them. Earth had grown fast. Too fast. The galaxy was watching. And no one seemed to want to talk. Only to prepare. Lian downloaded the signal into her private archive. Something didn't feel right. This wasn't just a warning. It was the beginning of something bigger. She had seen enough in alien texts to know what happened when fear led decisions. She walked out of the dome and into the quiet hallway. Her boots echoed against the floor. She passed by scientists who smiled, unaware of what she knew. She didn't smile back. Behind her, the signal kept repeating. Warning, Containment Protocol 9A, Threat Status, Earth Expansion. A message from across the stars. A message born of fear. The Galactic Coalition Council gathered in a ring-shaped chamber aboard Virex Ultor, a colossal space station orbiting the neutral moon of Vega Prime. 17 species were represented, each with their own seats, languages, and voices. But only one voice dominated the room. Burak Thrin stood tall among his own kind, the Zaleth, an advanced, long-lived species known for their strict order and logic. His skin shimmered like obsidian glass under the council lights, and his voice was like stone grinding against metal. Earth has advanced beyond acceptable limits, he said. Their energy production surpasses even ours. Their machines are self-replicating. Their fleet grows stronger every month. If we wait for war. A murmur spread through the chamber. Some agreed. Others hesitated. Saran of the Lyri, a soft-spoken species with skin like flowing silk, raised a hand. Earth has not attacked us. Their leaders have not spoken of conquest. They remain isolated. Curious, yes, but not dangerous. Burak's eyes narrowed. Curiosity is the first stage of ambition. Back on Earth, Lian Reyes stared at the same message, still pulsing across her private terminal. For hours, she had tried to decode more layers. What she found sent chills down her spine. There were multiple coalition plans listed in the signal, not just warnings. There were outlines for surveillance, for interference, and even for destruction. The Alien Council was not just watching Earth. They were preparing to act. She sent another encrypted report to Earth Command, but this time she received no response. Instead, a new notice arrived in her system. Project Horizon has entered Phase 3. Clearance revoked. You were reassigned to passive translation. She knew what that meant. They were shutting her out. Lian closed her terminal and stared into the empty lab. Every window was sealed now. The dome was closed. No more stargazing. No more outside communication. Down on Earth, beneath the floating cities and silent towers, Project Horizon was coming alive. Miles beneath the ground, in hidden bunkers, engineers activated massive coils of quantum shielding. Rail cannons, once just theory, were being installed. Artificial minds were calculating impact points in space, predicting alien movements with cold precision. Earth wasn't waiting anymore. And neither was Vurak. He returned to his quarters after the council meeting and stared at a holographic model of Earth. He zoomed in on their orbital paths, their satellites, their growing moon base. Then he activated a private message to his fleet. Begin quiet mobilization. If the council delays, we will not. Meanwhile, Lian took a risk. She contacted an old friend, Juno Malik, a systems engineer working deep within Project Horizon's core. Their video link was grainy, unstable, but her voice was clear. Juno, something's wrong. We're moving too fast. I've seen alien communications. They're scared. Just like us. Juno frowned. That's not what the council's telling us. They said aliens are preparing for a strike. We can't afford to wait. They're reacting to us, Juno. This is a loop. We're all just reacting to fear. Juno looked down. Then, without another word, he ended the call. Lian sat in silence. She knew now both sides were caught in the same trap. Not hate. Not greed. Fear. Vurak looked out the window of his warship. Earth's sun glowed in the distance, small and fierce. He whispered something in his own tongue, an old Zaleth phrase. Strike before the shadow grows. On both sides of space, ships moved. Shields activated. Leaders gave quiet, heavy orders. And somewhere in the quiet of the stars, a war began to form not from anger, but from silence, doubt, and dread. The stars above Earth had always looked peaceful, like scattered lights on black velvet. But for Dr. Lian Reyes, they now held tension. Warnings. Whispers. Her workroom was quiet, lit only by the soft blue glow of her interface. The door was sealed from the inside. She had disconnected from Earth Command hours ago. She no longer trusted them. They had stopped replying to her reports. Her clearance had been revoked. She had become a ghost inside her own station. Still, she worked. On the screen in front of her, alien code scrolled line by line. Ancient glyphs and symbols translated into simple phrases. Threat detected. Response necessary. Containment recommended. The same message echoed from different alien sources. But something else caught her attention, an embedded signature. A diplomatic seal. It belonged to Sarah N. of the Lyre, one of the few alien voices who had argued against war. Lian remembered Sarah N. Years ago, during the Earth-Lyre peace talks, they had shared a conversation about languages and emotion. The Lyre were empathic. They didn't just speak. They felt intention. Sarah N. had seemed gentle, curious, almost hopeful. Desperate, Lian took a risk. She sent an encrypted transmission across a rarely used diplomatic channel, coded in old Lyre syntax. Message to Sarah N. Dr. Lian Reyes of Earth requests dialogue. Urgent. Misunderstanding may lead to war. She waited. Minutes passed. Then hours. And then an answer. The screen flickered. A soft image appeared. Sarah N. stood in a quiet, dim room. Their face was calm but serious. Lian, Sarah N. said, I feared this day would come. Lian leaned closer. The signals, the threat codes, they're based on fear, aren't they? Not evidence. Sarah N. nodded slowly. Yes. The Coalition remembers the Creel War. One species rose too fast. Refused diplomacy. Burned 7 planets. Now, they see Earth and panic. Vurak uses that fear. He believes he's protecting the galaxy. But we're afraid too, Lian said. They're building weapons because we are. We're building weapons because they are. No one started this. We're both reacting. Sarah N. looked down, then back at her. There is more. I have sent you a historical archive, sealed records from before the Creel War. Study them. You will understand the pattern. The screen dimmed. A large file began to download. It was thousands of pages long, filled with old reports, conversations, images, and maps. Lian skimmed the summary. It was a mirror. A civilization called the Vadans. Peaceful at first. They rose quickly, just like Earth. The galaxy grew wary. The Vadans began building for protection. The others misunderstood it as aggression. Fear led to pressure. Pressure led to strikes. The war that followed destroyed the Vadans and much of the galaxy with them. Lien sat back, her hands shaking. The words on the last page were clear. Fear creates the enemy it believes it must destroy. Earth was walking the same path, and no one on the council wanted to hear it. She needed help, but the channels were locked. The government had shut down open communication. She couldn't go public through official means. But there was another way. A hidden Earth network used only by scientists and researchers for anonymous debates. It wasn't secure, but it was open. If she shared the alien history there, people might listen. The truth could spread faster than fear. She began typing. Transmission from Dr. Lien Reyes. Urgent truth about the Galactic Coalition. She uploaded the data Saren had sent, along with her own translation and explanation. She left her name on it. She wanted the world to know who was speaking. When she hit send, the screen went black for a second. Then it lit up again, views climbing by the second. A message blinked at the top of the feed. File shared with over 4 million users. It had begun. On the other side of space, Vurak watched the same file leak into their networks. He stood silently as his officers rushed around him, confused, alert. This changes perception, one of them said. Vurak's voice was low, cold. It changes nothing. Fear is already planted. The tree will still grow. He turned toward the window, looking toward the blue dot in the distance. Back in her station, Lien watched the stars. Somewhere, voices had been heard. But would they be enough? The world didn't react quietly. Within hours of Lien's leak, Earth was awake. News channels flooded with the story, alien fears revealed, Earth could repeat ancient war. Social feeds exploded. Everyone had a theory. Some thanked Lien. Some called her a traitor. Some demanded answers from the Earth Council. In the quiet corners of space, her message reached even further. On Mars Station Theta, where military strategists had been training for orbital defense, operations came to a brief halt. Screens that once displayed battle simulations now played pieces of alien history, evidence of an ancient war born from fear. One soldier whispered, "They're afraid of us, just like we're afraid of them." Some commanders told their teams to ignore the story. Others lowered their weapons and listened. Lien watched from her lab, breath held. The views kept rising. People were talking. But was it enough? She opened her private feed and saw a message from Juno Malik. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." Lien called him instantly. His image flickered on her screen. He looked tired. "I've seen the archive," Juno said. "It's real. No one's denying it anymore. But it doesn't matter. Horizon is already active." Her heart sank. "What stage?" "Final phase," he said. "In 3 days, we'll be able to launch a full defense barrier around Earth. If aliens make a move, Earth will respond fast and hard." Lien leaned forward. "But now we know they're just afraid. They're not planning an invasion. They're reacting to us, just like we're reacting to them." "I know," Juno said. "But the Council doesn't care. They say it's too late to pull back. They won't admit fear built this project. They're calling it strategic stability." She clenched her fists. "It's not stability. It's a trigger." At that moment, halfway across the galaxy, the alien council erupted into chaos. Vurak stood at the center of the great chamber, furious. The message Lien had shared had now reached billions, humans and aliens alike. "This human, this translator, has violated every agreement between our species," he shouted. "She has exposed our weaknesses, twisted our history, and spread fear among our own citizens." Saren rose from their seat, calm as ever. "She has done what you had not, told the truth. That fear drives us all. Not hatred, not logic, just fear." Murmurs spread again. Some council members nodded. Others looked unsure. Vurak turned to the central console. "I am invoking Article 17. Emergency response. Fleet 1 will mobilize. Not to attack, yet, but to position. If Earth moves, we strike first." A vote was cast. By a narrow margin, it passed. Alien warships began to move. The news hit Earth in under an hour. Telescopes detected the shift in formation. A coalition fleet was coming, not firing, but definitely not friendly. Earth's leaders reacted in panic. The Council ordered Project Horizon to full readiness. Power grids shifted. Defense satellites turned toward space. Orbital cannons charged. The countdown had begun. Lien received the alert in her lab. Her screen blinked red. Defense network online. Preparing strike position. She closed her eyes. It was all happening. Just like in the Vaden records. Fear. Movement. Retaliation. Collapse. She needed to stop it, but not alone. She sent a final encrypted message to Saren. It's happening. Again. Can we send a message to both sides together? Saren replied almost instantly. Yes. But it must be more than words. It must be truth. Their history. Our fear. Your voice. Lian and Saren began crafting a single message. A joint broadcast. They used the ancient Vaden War files, Lian's translations, and Saren's voice to speak to both humans and aliens. The message would bypass all firewalls, all government blocks. It would reach every screen, every device, every corner of space where humans and aliens watched in fear. It would speak of what truly caused war, not weapons, not greed, but fear. It would speak of the Vadens, a species wiped out because both sides waited too long to listen. And it would end with a choice, repeat the past, or change it. Lian hovered over the send button. Juno called one last time. If this doesn't work, he said, we'll be at war in 48 hours. Lian nodded. Then it has to work. She pressed send. The stars held their breath. Above Earth, the sky had changed. It was no longer just blue and calm, it was filled with shadows. Satellite weapons hovered silently in orbit, powered by quantum cores. Earth's defense grid was now active. Project Horizon, once a secret, now revealed itself in glowing rings around the planet. One move from the enemy, and the system would respond within seconds. On every news screen, countdowns appeared. Time to readiness, 41 hours, 23 minutes. Coalition fleet, 1.3 million kilometers in closing. People watched the numbers fall. Some prayed. Others protested. Most just waited. In her lab, Dr. Lian Reyes stared at the message she and Saraman had sent. It was everywhere now, on human networks, on alien feeds, even in outer colonies. She watched pieces of it play in loops. The Vadens believed they were protecting themselves. Their enemies believed they were preparing for conquest. Neither side fired first, but both armed for it. In the end, no one survived. The footage from ancient archives was raw, dust-covered cities, burned skies, fractured moons. The story was too close to the present, almost identical. But the real question wasn't whether people believed it. It was whether anyone would act before time ran out. On the bridge of the Coalition flagship, Vurak Thrin stood still, eyes fixed on the live feed of Earth. The blue planet turned slowly, quietly. Beautiful. Deceptive. A young officer approached. Sir, more than half the council has asked us to pause our advance. They want a full debate on the Reyes transmission. Vurak didn't turn. And if Earth uses that time to prepare an ambush? What then? We see no signs of increased military movement since the broadcast. Vurak finally turned to face him. His voice was low and heavy. Signals are not always visible. Fear hides behind quiet eyes. The Vadens taught us that. The officer hesitated. But what if this time is different? Vurak said nothing. He looked out into the stars. Behind his eyes, war had already begun. On Earth, the council gathered for an emergency vote. Screens lit up around them with status reports. The defense grid was at 94% power. Quantum weapons fully calibrated. They had only one decision left. Fire first or wait. Dr. Reyes has shaken public trust, said one counselor. But we cannot base policy on emotion. History tells us fear is a weapon. The aliens are moving closer. Another replied, and yet, they haven't fired. They followed a pattern of caution, not aggression. And that message, if true, changes everything. A voice broke in through a secure channel. It was Lian. She had hacked in again. Please, she said. I know I've gone against orders. But you need to listen. I've seen both sides. I've seen what happens when everyone prepares for war out of fear. It doesn't matter who fires first. If we stay this course, it will happen. And we'll all lose. The council paused. Some looked away. Others looked down. The final vote was delayed. Lian left her lab and walked to the highest viewing chamber of the sky station. From there, she could see the Earth below, glowing softly in the dark. Above it, tiny flashes of movement, satellites aligning, engines pulsing, shields humming. Everything was ready. She whispered, Please, don't let this be the end. A ping echoed through her earpiece. Sara's voice followed. Calm, but urgent. We have one more chance. There's an ancient Lyri transmission, never released. A recording of the final Vaden message moments before their last planet burned. I am sending it now. The file was small, 1 minute long. Lian opened it. The voice in the recording was old, cracking, but clear. To whoever hears this, we were not monsters. We were afraid. And so were they. And in fear, We waited too long to speak. Lian looked up. We have to send this. To everyone. Again. This time with names. Faces. No secrets. Sarah Ann responded without pause. Agreed. Together, they prepared a second joint broadcast. No longer anonymous. No longer academic. Lian Reyes. Sarah Ann of the Lyre. A human and an alien speaking as one. They added the recording. Then they added a single line. The final war doesn't have to begin, but someone must stop it first. And they sent it. It spread faster than the first message. Soldiers paused. Civilians wept. Scientists lowered their tools. Even on warships, officers played it through their private comms. On the Coalition flagship, Vurak stood alone as the message repeated in the background. We were not monsters. We were afraid. He said nothing. Then, quietly, he reached out and pressed a single key on his console. Fleet. Hold position. Await further orders. Earth's defense grid received the change within seconds. Satellites detected the halt in movement. Power levels on the alien ships dropped slightly. Earth Command hesitated. Then they responded. Horizon systems on standby. All weapons cooled. No launch. Across two civilizations, silence followed. But it wasn't the silence of fear. It was the silence of hope. The war that almost was never came. In the silence that followed, a wave of relief swept across Earth. Across the Coalition. Across the stars. The fleets didn't retreat, but they didn't advance either. Weapons stayed armed but were no longer aimed. The world didn't celebrate with cheers because no one truly felt victorious. What they felt was something deeper, like a long breath finally released. Lian Reyes sat in the observatory dome, staring out into the stars. The room, once locked down, was open again. Air hummed softly. Screens had stopped blinking red. The urgent alerts had vanished. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held a tablet. On it, the message she and Sarah Ann had broadcast, the message that changed everything, was still playing on a loop. Not by force. By choice. The council had met again, this time without secrecy. Publicly. Leaders from every continent had stood before the world and admitted what few politicians ever do. They had been wrong. Fear had pushed them too close to the edge. In one voice, a translator had helped pull them back. Lian was invited to speak before them, not as a scientist, but as a witness. She stood in a tall, clear chamber, with billions watching from screens across Earth. Her voice was calm. Her words were simple. I'm not a leader. I'm not a hero. I'm someone who listened to signals, to patterns, to fear. I saw how fear grows, how it spreads. We don't need to destroy each other. We just need to understand each other. We can still choose peace. There was no applause. Just silence. And then nods. Tears. Messages from across the planet, across starships, from humans and aliens alike, saying the same thing. We hear you. On the Coalition flagship, Vurak Thrin sat in his private chamber. The lights were dim. He stared at a projection of Earth, rotating slowly in silence. A new message had come through, this time not a warning, but an invitation. The Earth Council formally requests a peace summit with the Galactic Coalition. Neutral ground. Equal voice. Full transparency. He didn't respond at first. Then, after a long pause, he pressed a single button. Summon the council. Let's talk. 3 weeks later, a meeting was held on the surface of Europa, one of Jupiter's frozen moons. A small dome was built, half by humans, half by coalition engineers. Inside, leaders, translators, scientists, and diplomats sat in a circle, no weapons, no guards. Lian Reyes sat beside Sarah Ann. She looked around the room and saw faces she had only read about in reports, alien species of every shape and color, humans from every nation. They weren't shouting. They were listening. The first words spoken were not formal. They weren't even political. They were simply, we are afraid, but we are here. That was enough. Talks began. Slowly. Carefully. Honestly. Within days, a joint resolution was signed. No first strikes. No hidden fleets. All defense systems were to be disclosed and observed. A new council would be formed, half human, half alien, to study mutual threats, peace efforts, and shared science. The war that had nearly begun became something else, cooperation. Months later, Earth and the Coalition launched their first joint ship, the Horizon Reclaimed. The name was chosen by public vote. It symbolized more than a project. It symbolized what had been avoided, what had been saved. Lian stood at the launch platform, watching the ship rise. It was smooth and quiet. lit with soft white lights. On board were 50 humans and 50 aliens, traveling together to study a distant nebula. Not for war, for knowledge. Saranin stood beside her, wrapped in a warm Earth-made scarf. You see, Saranin said softly, fear still lives, but it doesn't rule. Vian smiled. Not anymore. They watched the ship disappear into the sky. Behind them, the stars were still silent, still distant. But now, they felt open, not as a battlefield, but as a future.